Every morning, the countdown begins for the markets with meticulous research and analysis designed to help you capitalize on the trading day. Beaming live from the CNBC TV 18 Motilal Oswal studio.
Good morning. You're with us here on a fresh new edition of Bazaar Morning Call. Thursday morning, we are coming to you live as always from the CNBC TV 18 Motilal Oswal studios. In 2 good days, can we see a repeat today, build on the gains? That's the big question. I'm Prashant. With me, my colleagues Nigel and Surabhi. Guys, good morning.
Hi, good morning, folks. Well, yesterday we managed to break out of our long-standing trading range. And this morning we've not woken up to, any untoward incident or any, out-of-the-park kind of news. So maybe, who knows, bulls keep marching on?
Well, it feels a little weird, right? I mean, no big news point overnight. But let's see. And today we have expiry as well. So let's see how it plays out.
Absolutely. And last night was kind of, from Wall Street, not very much by way of cues. It's kind of flattish, actually. But markets
and no missiles on social media either.
On social media? No, actually, there are a few.
Actually, there are a few.
There were a few.
But, that's the times that we are in. Now, just to take it from the top, the U.S. market and the S&P at least was largely unchanged. S&P 500, that is, largely unchanged from the previous close. Actually, it was actually absolutely unchanged. But it remains, the headline is not that. The headline is it's just less than 1% away from an all-time high. It's been that way, The one sort of, as we get into the end of the month, there seems to be some selling which is happening. I mean, 2 days in a row now, we got to above 6,100 and then the market kind of sort of sold off and closed under it. So we'll see if there are some outflows bunched up to the end of the month. But that's very, very near term. Nasdaq about 0.21% higher. The Dow was down about 0.25. So kind of mixed signals in that sense. I just want to talk about one or two single stocks. Nvidia was up 4%. That's hit a new all-time high. That is part of the magnificent, fantastic 5, 7, however you want to count it. But the big tech, right? So Nvidia hits a new all-time high. The graphics will come up on your screen. The other one, of course, is BP, British Petroleum. British Petroleum at one point was trading up 10%. It finally closed about 1.5% higher. There were reports that Shell is in an early stages of a potential acquisition. Shell BP. Now that could be a big one. Perhaps implications here in India as well, because you've got, the companies listed in India, in terms of Castrol. So we'll see. Macro markets, not very much. US 10-year yield was down 1 basis point, so unchanged, 4.29, 4.3%. Oil prices went up a little bit. The stock of oil, which was reported by the US government, that fell more than expected, but nothing, 68, we're right there, pat there, so not very much. Now, the other bit of news, of course, is coming out of Europe, and this was actually happening while we were still trading. Some bit of it, the Trump press conference with the NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte happened while at about 1:30, 2 o'clock. And we'll play out some of those comments from Trump. But the headline is, as expected, NATO has agreed to increase defense spending to 5% of GDP by 2035. The question, though, is how much of this is actually going to happen? How much of it is rhetoric? Trump's term, remember, ends in 2029. So, do we really have the ability to forecast beyond that point how things will be? But for now, given all the threats, they've agreed to reach 5% of GDP by 2035. Spain withheld from the commitment, President Trump then threatened to increase tariffs on Spain. But he was positive otherwise as far as Europe is concerned and NATO is concerned. And he basically said that we are here to help Europe protect their countries. Remember, he's threatened to pull out of NATO by saying, well, why should we spend all the money on NATO to protect you while you are not stepping up your spending? That basically has been the grouse for a very long time from President Trump. So that's the news flow bit. I don't think there are any real implications straight away. defense stocks run. Actually, if you look at even European defense stocks yesterday, it's not as if they were zooming up or anything. This is well advertised in that sense. Here in India, for example, defense index was down 2%. It was the biggest loser, and actually for the last two sessions, it's been seeing a little bit of profit booking. I'll just tie in the levels. So yesterday we got a good rally on the Nifty, and I was saying this yesterday same time that day before there was perhaps for some a little bit of hesitation whether the peace will hold, but yesterday it became clear and the market marched on. We ended at about 25,244. We need to take out 25,317 levels, which is the high of the week. And then after that, then you open up further upside levels. The weekly upper Bollinger Band stands at 25,823. So that is the target. On the downside, if you just look at the supports, 25,055, which is the 40-hourly exponential moving average, and then the 20-day moving average, which is 24,897. Bank Nifty needs to close, moving on to the next index, Bank Nifty needs to close above 57,049. And here the upper weekly Bollinger Band, which becomes the target. Next target is 58,877. Support, again, same sort of averages. 40-hourly is 56,260, and the second support at the 20-day, which is 56,040 levels. GIFT Nifty will give you a quick sense of how we are likely to start. It's up another 40 points. Surabhi.
Yeah, absolutely. So quiet in terms of news headlines for a change. It was the big headline was the NATO one, really, with the members deciding to increase the individual defense spend from 2% to 5% of GDP, and all those sort of, headlines that you had around that. By the way, Mr. Trump also was commenting on Iran. He said that he doesn't see Iran getting back in the quote-unquote nuclear business, and then he went on to say that if they do try to get back, then we'll be there. You can interpret it in any way you want, but basically they're watching and they're not allowing Iran to go back to their nuclear program. There are talks as well. That's what Trump said. Some of the other aides from Washington are also indicating that talks with Iran could resume next week, but the Iranian side has not confirmed that. So let's see how this plays out. And then, of course, he was going on to deny the recent security reports that came out in the U.S., suggesting that the program has not been entirely dismantled, but only set back by a couple of months. There's apparently a briefing that the U.S. Defense Secretary is going to be doing later this evening to perhaps set the record straight on what was destroyed and what really happened, the obliterated comment that the US president made. Anyway, something interesting from the Fed, because yesterday was day 2 of the Fed testimony that continued, and again the Fed chair continued to indicate that they'll be data dependent. But aside of that, the Fed is now looking at the proposal of easing capital requirements for large banks on Wall Street. This could be really significant and a big departure. Norms were tightened after the global financial crisis, and now there seems to be a growing clamor to ease some of those norms. What I'm talking about is the enhanced supplementary leverage ratio. It was taken higher after the GFC, and now they're saying there are enough capital buffers with large Wall Street banks. Perhaps it's a good time to reduce the sense of that leverage or that particular norm. So let's watch for this. Asian markets this morning, they're mixed, largely range bound, but the Japanese market actually is doing very well. It's up and about almost 1% higher on the Japanese Nikkei. The mainland China market, the Hong Kong markets, they're subdued. You can see on the screens there, Hang Seng is down about 0.7%. For us, we had a final break out of the trading range yesterday. The bulls prevailed. 25,200 has been taken out. So let's look at the distance from the highs. The Nifty is just about 4% away from the all-time high. The Bank Nifty is, barely 0.5% away from, clinching that level again. The mid-cap index about 3.4%. Small-cap index is a little further off, 5% away from the all-time high. So both U.S. equities and Indian markets flirting once again with 52-week highs. The fund flow situation continues to be really patchy and mixed. Again, we had selling from FIIs, but you have to remember that all the fundraising and the block action data could be skewed. FIIs sold off stocks worth about 2,400 crores yesterday. In the cash market, domestic institutions were buyers, so it was nicely offset, almost an equal amount of buying and selling. So net result was not very impactful in terms of flows for the market. Just to talk about some stocks, since we're talking about fundraising, I'll keep an eye out on more names. AU Small Finance Bank, the board is going to be meeting on the 28th to decide their fundraising plans. It could include equity. And Canfin Homes is also looking at a mix of equity and debt raise. And on the equity side, it could be 1,000 crores of a QIP as well. So we'll be watching for some of these names. Nigel.
Well, I'll tell you what, today's expiry day and the bulls will want to drive home the advantage. So we have been in this 800-point range on the Nifty. The good news is we're getting into expiry day at the high point, and the bulls will want to end this series with a bit of a flourish. Let's see how that goes. First up, in terms of the rollover picture, both on the Nifty and the Nifty Bank, more or less in line with what we've seen in terms of averages. So that's in line. Moving to what happened with regard to the FIs on the index futures, they covered some mild shorts in yesterday's trading session. They remain net short with close to 77% of their positions on the short side. The interesting aspect is, if you look at the index options data, both the FIs and the clients, there was some sense of writing of puts in yesterday's trading session. And that's heartening, right? I mean, on both those two, FIs as well as clients. But for the markets on the whole, the call writers, they still believe they're in the game. So the bears believe they can defend the higher levels. Even in yesterday's trading session, if you're looking at, strikes at around 25,200 call, well, that was fairly active. 25,250 call, 25,300 call. All of them were fairly active in yesterday's trading session with a good amount of open interest build up. So at higher levels, the bears believe they can defend it. So just plugging in the numbers, if you plug in the options data with the premium and you look at the recent high, the reference point or the resistance mark you're looking at on the upside is 25,320. That's a recent high, right? A couple of sessions ago, we went out there. So that's the important marker. And also you're looking at around 25,250 on the upside. Support zones, 25,050, 25,100. That's the important mark you're looking at. Yesterday, the Nifty Bank actually was off color. But in today's trading session, you'll want to keep an eye out on that. And as long as it's holding above the first reference point at around 20 DMA, you'll see that this one, in fact, is pretty much good for more. So we'll have to keep an eye out on this large constitute of the index. The banking names, yesterday a little under the weather. Today, they'll have to perform. And the IT index, I'm going to keep an eye out on that because the IT index got hammered. Remember when the Nasdaq was getting hit, we had the IT index as well that got hit. Now the Nasdaq is on the verge of making a fresh all-time high. But the IT index, the Nifty IT index, well, it's still a distance away. It's actually 15% away from its recent 52-week high. So I want to see whether or not the IT index as well has further legs in it. In the last couple of sessions, that has come back in terms of strength. Stock that I'm looking at is BEL. It's corrected, as you all mentioned. NATO looking to spend more on defense. This one could be a potential beneficiary if India needs to be a bigger constitute in terms of exports. And also, it's ended closer to around the 20 DMA. 20 DMA is around 395 rupees. If that level holds out, maybe, in fact, frontline name, valuation's pretty okay, and there is an export opportunity as well. I'll keep an eye out on BEL with that 395 as the first reference point. Back to you guys.
Okay, all right, got it. Thanks for that, Nigel. So let's quickly get started with the equity call of the morning. Lawrence Belanco of CLSA says the Nifty looks all set to resume the original breakout from the February-April double bottom pattern. He says a close above 25,116 to 25,222 would confirm the resumption of the original base breakout that supports an upside target of 26,333, essentially a retest of the 2024 highs. At the stock level, he says they feature Indus Towers, Shriram Finance and Cholamandalam Investments as buy candidates. So basically, the Nifty has closed above those critical targets or levels that Lawrence was talking about. CLSA sounding upbeat on the technicals.
Absolutely, and we'll speak with him later over the coming days as well.